Thank you very much all for coming. Lovely to see you all. Lots of faces I recognise, some I don't. So it's nice to see you all. And if I don't know you, please do come up and say hello afterwards. Have a look at the jewellery. I hope you've had a chance to look at some of it already. We're on view for another 10 days or so until the 30th, so do come back. If you know anyone who wants to look at some jewellery, do come in. Carol doesn't need much of an introduction, partly because her name is plastered all behind us, and I'm sure many of you know her particularly well. Thank you very much for coming. I thought it would be a great opportunity to pop in to talk about some of the jewels we've got, but also I know prominently displayed here your book, which has been out for about a couple of months now, I think.
Yes,
Yeah,
and thank you for asking me, Christian. I mean, there is nothing I like more than talking about jewellery, so I'm in the right place.
Excellent, excellent. I do have some notes because there were a million questions I wanted to ask you and I kept forgetting them all during the day, so I thought I'd better write some of them down. But yeah, actually one of the first ones was, I found the format of this book intriguing because it's about the 7 sort of different stories. And for anyone who hasn't seen the book yet, you go through, well, you call it hoops, and then you go through rings. But why choose, from your background,
Yes.
why choose to do a book in this sort of format, in this style of these 7 stories?
Well, for those of you who don't know, I was jewellery director at British Vogue for about 25 years. I was the sort of person who came into Condé Nast. Condé Nast had nobody who did jewellery in any Condé Nast magazine around the world. And I decided to change this. So I sort of worked my way through the magazines and then British Vogue, and then I wrote for American Vogue. Because, you know, I decided that jewellery was more important than fashion, even though I studied fashion. So I thought this is what I was going to do. And so for all those years, I sat there and I announced, this is the new season, this is what you must wear, this is a new look. And actually, when I thought about it, I thought, actually, what is new? And I thought, scroll back, and even before we do cave paintings, we were adorning ourselves with whatever we could find, pebbles, sticks, shells. You know, there are shells in the British Museum, 70,000 years old. Sorry, older. I mean, going back to the very, very beginning. And I thought, well, actually, nothing is new. And I decided to boil it down to the things that we have always worn. And I decided those were the charm, the hoop, the ring, the head ornament, the brooch, the cuff. And I wrote their histories. And I tell some stories. I have a podcast of the same name. And so Simon & Schuster, the publishers, came to me and said, we like the podcast, will you write a book for us? And that's the tack I decided to take, that actually we have very, very persistent jewellery rituals. And these are the way we wear it, and these are the 7 things I decided that have stood the test of time and that we always wear.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating in the book as well. It's that cyclical nature of these things and how jewellery is frequently repeated. Throughout my career, I've often done research, and you see a piece of jewellery that comes up in front of you and think, that's amazing, it's incredible, I've never seen it before. Particularly, I saw an amazing feather necklace from the 1980s, and I happened to be looking through a Boucheron book a couple of days later and found one from 1899, which was exactly the same. And I like your references to that, you know, the nature of how jewellery is cyclical. It's sustainable, because that is the nature of it. You know, the stones never get broken down. I suppose in this day and age, it is probably the most sustainable form rather than sort of fashion and everything. This is what we look at now, but I love the fact. So, but why from the jewellery did you decide, from fashion, to break away into jewellery?
Well, because I thought it was more interesting, and I think there's so much more to it, because you can have the geology, the design, the glamour, the personal memories, the attachment to other human beings. It makes it the most personal thing that we wear every day. I mean, far more than fashion. And I thought, out of all the things that we do that we've always done, jewelry is the only thing that survives that we can use in the same way. If you think of it, that's sort of everything we do now, whether it's telephones, or the way we live, the fashion we wear, it's all entirely different. But the jewellery, we can go into any museum and walk out wearing the jewellery and people will say, oh, that's great, well, who's the new designer? Who designed that? And it looks completely right, and we do adhere to it. So I find it very interesting. I find also in the book I talk about how, for me, jewellery is at the intersection of everything we do, whether it's art, fashion, politics, economics, religion, Hollywood, monarchy. And I find it's at the intersection of everything that we do and everything that matters to us.
Yeah, absolutely. But did you find, thinking about the intersection when you were working at Vogue, when we were just talking about the cyclical nature of jewellery, however, yes, promoting new designers and new fashions,
yes,
was that something that, you know, when you were at Vogue, people would really listen to? Was that the influence for the next season? Or did you find people were much more, I'll wear what I like, I know what I like, because jewellery is incredibly diverse?
I think, well, I like to think actually, sort of slightly pre-internet, that Vogue did have power, and that there were certain taste-making magazines that editors would go out and go to shows and come back and say, this is what we're all going to be wearing. I think now it's much looser, because who are the tastemakers? It's not really glossy magazines anymore. It's influence, it's celebrities, it's the girl next door, it's your next door neighbour. It's people, I think, are much freer to wear what they like and make their own style. And I think that's what jewellery should be in a way. It's about self-expression and identity and how you want to present yourself.
I think, yeah, I very much, I know from having worked at auctions for many years, COVID was a big game changer. The amount of, you know, from traditional sales, you know, having an auction, to online sales changed things a huge amount. And I think the speed and versatility of the internet, and now with influence and things like Instagram, changes the jewellery world incredibly fast. But I think we forget that it's really difficult to make lots of these pieces of jewellery. And often, you know, there's a pressure on jewellers to be creating new lines, new ideas all the time, which maybe we haven't seen, yes, for a long time. Jewellery's changed so much.
Well, it's what changed, I think, really changed the landscape of jewellery, was when all the fashion brands came in. And I think it was around 2000 that Dior had a big launch at Harrods, and we all went to the food hall. I don't know why, it was a big dinner in the food hall. And every single fashion brand now really has a jewellery line. You know, it's a sort of $150 billion cake, and they want a piece of that cake. And I think that's really changed it. It changed the design. I think, you know, before, you know, on Bond Street, it was really the big four. It was sapphires, emeralds, rubies, diamonds. And I think when fashion brands came in, they really pushed design. They pushed people to make more creative, dare I say, pieces in some ways in fine jewellery. And they used different kinds of stones as well. They were sort of pushing the boat on different sort of palette colours of stones, and maybe more semi-precious as opposed to what we think of as the precious. And I think that's really changed jewellery, actually, the fashion brands. Some ways for good, as I said, very creative. Some ways, I think, I lament the fact that it's so hard for young designers to get going now, because the big brands do dominate. How can young people compete in an industry that's very expensive for them to get going? The materials they use is expensive. And so I try and encourage them and say, you have what the big brands can't offer. You can make it very personal. You can make things, people can commission from you. You can make them part of the jewellery story, their own jewellery story. And I think when people are involved, it makes it that much more special, and it sort of adds to the magic. So I sort of try and encourage that, you know, that personal connection and opening it up and people learning through the designer is what some of the big brands can't offer. So I just encourage them to focus on that, because I think they really need help. And also there was a story this week that our silver allied crafts are really endangered and threatened, and some of these particular crafts that we've used since the Bronze Age, people aren't learning, people aren't doing, and I really feel that we've got to encourage young craftspeople.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I was a few years ago, I was contacted by a very important British family who had damaged a very important piece of jewellery, and there's no one in the country who could fix it. The enamel was so old and so highly important that there is no one in this country who can actually do the work to fix it, and that becomes incredibly sad. And I know there are a few jewellery designers and dealers who have said, yeah, we need to support young designers, not particularly, well, I mean, not just in going into designing for themselves. There are plenty of amazing young designers, but people who want to work in the old style as well, to be able to fix the old pieces.
Handcraft.
Exactly, yeah. So I know the British Designers Guild have a lot of sort of support for young jewellers, which is really important, because so many of the names that we get here, many of these craftsmen started, on their own, and then perhaps were absorbed by the big names. With working, I know you work quite closely with Dolce & Gabbana.
Yes, I have done.
Yeah, and do many
Talking
of these...
about big fashion brands.
Exactly.
And I tell you why I did, actually, because they asked me to write a book. They've been making fine jewellery for about 10 years. And what I loved about them was that they did it with complete and utter passion and abandonment. They just said, we don't know what these stones are, but we like blue. We're going to use this. We're going to try that. We're going to make a gondola. We're going to make a life-size lemon. And they do it with such passion and so true to their Italian roots. And they built a huge a workshop. They have made a gem lab. They're doing it properly, and they're trying to really invigorate some of the Italian crafts like filigree. And so I loved that about them, that they were doing it with that passion that I felt had sort of disappeared a bit when without obviously naming names, of all the big fine jewelers make wonderful things and they're very beautiful. But sometimes you feel it's a bit, we've gone back to the archives and we've recreated this. And I sort of, sometimes I think we need some new blood, and they do it with such Italian zest and passion that I really admire that.
Do you think many of the big fashion houses now that are all in the market, and I always feel quite mean saying this, but many of them, not Dolce & Gabbana, because I haven't seen many of those pieces come up on the market, but sort of 15 years ago.
No, they sell them. They have an Ultimodo show and they sell them off the runway.
Yeah.
They make one piece and it's gone.
Yeah, well, and it's they're limited numbers.
And they've got very loyal customers.
Yeah, some of the other names, like Louis Vuitton, for example, when they first came into the market, the secondary market for them wasn't as big, but now it has, it's rocketed a huge amount. I remember one of the, I think Chanel made the Millie Laforêt rings, which were these beautiful sort of fantasy rings. Dior, that was it. And 15 years ago, they didn't make much at auction. Now they can achieve more than retail because, again, the sort of limited numbers. And I find that sort of facet to it very interesting. But is it, are they designing them in-house? Are they looking out at sort of external jewelers, small workshop, potentially, young designers to bring on board?
Well, I think that is the problem because, to get these pieces made, they buy up entire workshops. So that, again, takes these workshops out of the remit of younger designers who might be going to them to use them, and then suddenly Buccellati have bought this workshop and they have no access to it. So I think that's another problem of dominating, that we need more people to make these things so younger people can have access.
Yeah, I think, well, it's good that they're supporting as well, because as we were just saying, young jewelers find it difficult to get into the industry. And the secondary market is particularly tough, because of the relative values. But I find it interesting. The chapters in your book where you refer, you talk about the history of a piece, for example, the rings or the hoops or the cuff. The cuff is a particularly interesting one. And then bring it to the contemporary jewelers who work in that style, things like, Fulco di Verdura and his famous cuffs. Angela Cummings, made cuffs as well. And I think that's really interesting.
What I loved this week was that I talk in one of the chapters about pomanders, and how in sort of medieval Britain the stench of walking along the streets must have been completely overpowering. and slaughterhouses that empty out the entrails, and personal hygiene obviously wasn't really top of the agenda. And so people had these perforated circular pomanders to put sweet herbs in, because people really believed that disease was carried by smell and they had to protect themselves. And I was so interested this week by a jeweler in New York who's made these small gold cages, and she's dousing tissues in perfume and putting it in these little gold cages to hang on a pendant, and saying, everyone in New York should carry one of these. New York stinks in the summer. And I thought, I just love these parallels of how not much changes.
No, exactly. On the warm days, I think we need some of those in London. But yeah, that is an interesting. So for a pomander, for example, I'm sure everyone here probably knows what they are. But there must be tons of people in New York who have got absolutely no idea. And is this the jeweler just looking back to something that is unknown, or something unusual to serve a purpose, or just, a whimsy?
I think just a whimsy, just an idea of sort of mixing the senses and thinking, well, I'll make my jewel smell, and I'll make it smell nice, and it's got a purpose to it. I think that's what it was. But, it's exactly the same idea as what Queen Elizabeth I or Mary Queen of Scots would have hung on their girdle or on the end of their rosary bead. It's got the same purpose.
Exactly, and then the sort of thing that you would expect. Hopefully, you would maybe next year see on the red carpet. Red carpet jewels are something you mention in your book as well.
Yes.
We've just had the Met Gala.
Yes.
Any highlight pieces?
Well, little brooches, and it was kind of how people were wearing them. They were sort of clustering them, and obviously when men are wearing them, men are big into brooches. I think they find it's an acceptable jewel they can wear, and it's now become, you don't see a man in a tuxedo on the red carpet without a great big brooch. Tiffany Schlumberger Bird on the Rock seems to be very popular. Diamonds, 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 and a can, and that's the sort of thing that I find quite interesting about what's happening at the moment and how history repeats, because I was in Bahrain last year and I was looking at natural pearls. And about 100 years ago, the natural pearl market completely, as you know, just sort of plummeted. There was a sort of perfect storm of events, so the Wall Street crash, the fact of overfishing along the Gulf Coast, and then, of course, culturing of pearls was perfected in Japan by Mikimoto. And the price of natural pearls, that have been the most highly prized things ever in the world, just literally plummeted and tanked. And I was thinking of that really now with the diamond market and what's happening, because now we have lab-grown stones. It's really affected the price of diamonds. And a lot of young people are thinking it's an ethical choice to have a lab-grown stone. And I'm in the mined stone camp. I will... Because I sort of feel like, for me, the magic of a jewel has to have something to do with the earth. And I think if you divorce a stone from its billion-year history, it doesn't mean anything. And so I hope that that's not going to be the case as what happened with the pearl, but it's slightly replicating that sort of process and what happened at that time.
I found it fascinating in the book. I loved it. There's you don't often see it in books these days. The lovely asterisk and then this massive footnote about the fake news, as it is of the diamond industry. Of half the camp, as you say, are saying they're much more sustainable, they're much more environmentally friendly, and then the other half saying, well, in fact, no, that's not true. The energy used to create synthetic stones is vast, and there are gigantic warehouses in China where they make these things. And natural mining is looking after the community, in the places, and they're much more ethical. So I find it fascinating that there is this division at the moment, and people constantly, it's probably the question I get asked most, and I have no idea where it's going to go. One of the things I always say...
They're not going to land up here, because there's no resale value, is there?
Exactly, yeah. No. I frequently say to people, absolutely, there's nothing wrong with buying synthetic diamond, as long as there is no resale value.
Except that, we have to think of the environment.
Yeah.
And should we buy things that there is no resale value, you're not going to pass down as an heirloom, what's it going to be? It's going to be chucked away? Is it going to be landfill?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a constantly changing market, and literally about sort of an hour ago, I just read a post that someone had said saying that they think that the natural diamond market is going to recover by 2027. So 18 months or so, and we'll see. But that would be a great thing to see. But
well, it's going great guns in Cannes this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people seem to be wearing diamonds everywhere, which is a wonderful thing. And yeah, the natural market is, I think, where we both lie. So long may it continue.
What I think, I was thinking about auctions and recently how probably you know better than me, but the highest prices reached for single big coloured diamonds.
Yeah.
And so for me, what's really undervalued at the moment is fantastic design, unique, one-off, handmade. I mean, there was a lot of jar pieces by Joel Arthur Rosenthal, the great name of our period, sold at Christie's recently. Somebody sold their collection. And there was a beautiful sort of apricot blossom bangle. And I think it fetched about $2 million. But I still think if you compare that to one of those big, the 10-carat blue diamond that was sold recently, that was $20 million.
Yeah.
What would you rather have, the design or the single stone? And I guess people are really buying for investment, aren't they? When it's at that level, they're buying to put that away as a portable wealth, something in their portfolio.
Absolutely. You see more and more with the stones, you see more and more sort of hedge funds buying up these pieces, because they are very easy to store. It's portable wealth. Not quite as portable as, the jar pieces, which are almost unwearable, some of them. I went to see some of them, they were incredible. But, there is a man with absolute talent. And as we were saying before with D&G, no qualms about any stone, just as long as it looks beautiful and the design is there.
And the other thing I thought last year that was so undervalued was this Georgian negligee, which was... came onto the market, and I'd actually never seen a negligee. So I was like first, Sotheby's sent out this press release. I was first in the morning to try it on. And it literally is a scarf. You can, it had 300 carats of Golconda diamonds, the best in the world. And you could literally throw it over your shoulder. You could have it long or throw it. And it was just the most amazing thing. And it also had this loose provenance that it was the tradition in the Anglesey family who had sold it originally, that it could have been made with the diamonds that were in Marie Antoinette's affair of the diamond necklace, or the necklace she never owned, but precipitated the fall of the French monarchy. This was the most beautiful thing in the world. And it sold for $3 million.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, I would have taken that any day to the Mediterranean blue.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I'm glad, because I was going to ask. I couldn't remember, because I remember seeing that piece a long time ago, whether the provenance was there. But if you don't know the Anglesey family, do go and Google them, because the fifth Marquess of Anglesey was called the Dancing Marquess. And he was an absolutely incredible character, had a huge amount of jewellery. And if I remember correctly, that's where the family money went. He blew it all, but was left with these amazing jewels and things, but that was it.
And his tiara, I think, that he wore, he did these productions in his house, stately home. And I think that was the first thing when they realised it had gone wrong, that I think he changed the chapel into a theatre. And he used to take part in these productions and wear this tiara, which I think is still at Hancock's in St James's, so you can see it at Hancock's.
Yeah, an amazing thing. But the life has changed slightly from then, sadly. But one of the other things that just popped into my mind, which I find really, really interesting, and is one of the things I sort of vaguely talk about when I'm doing talks to people, is the future of the jewellery industry. So synthetic diamonds aside, which is the thorny issue of the moment. I don't know if it's the same. No, I don't think it is the same thing. But you talk about, I think it's Boucheron are using aerogel. Do you know more about that? Because I meant to ask you earlier, and I really want to know. Well, it's fascinating.
They do like experimenting with different materials. And one of the ones that I liked particularly was they did this very complicated procedure where they were stabilizing petals of flowers.
Really?
And so they were using this sort of secret scientific system to stabilize the petals, and they were then setting them with a stone in the middle and enamel stamens. So it effectively was a flower. And I thought that was kind of extraordinary.
Yeah.
But they do experiment a lot, Boucheron.
Interesting.
I think gold is very, very expensive at the moment, as we know. Again, a huge store of wealth in difficult times. So I think silver jewellery will probably come through now. We'll see a resurgence of silver jewellery.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, it's such a persistent ritual, our use of jewellery, that I think about AI in the future, and I think, well, even if people are sitting at home gaming, their avatars will be wearing jewellery. They'll be wearing cuffs, brooches, head ornaments.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not going to let it go. It means something to us. And
Absolutely.
I think at the very beginning, when you think of Egyptian jewellery and the scarab and the Eye of Horus and all these protective ideas and beliefs that people wanted to wear, and I think the world doesn't become a less scary place. There are all kinds of challenges out there for us, and I think people do like to hold on to something that they feel has got some meaning, whether it's protective or not, the idea and the belief. I mean, I think Marlene Dietrich used to travel with St. Christopher's, a rabbit foot, a cross. I mean, she just used to sort of pile it on for just to be sure that she was going to travel safely.
Very sensible, I reckon.
And so I think we'll keep doing that, because I think it means something to us, and whether or not we're our ancestors looking out into the dead of night and fearful of what the next day would bring, I mean, we're all human beings, and we can feel the same now.
Yeah, absolutely. The security and the personnel element of jewellery, which is passed down, and yet looking forward to what comes next.
And often it's a connector too of our community. So it means something. We recognise each other through it, or we kind of understand each other and where we've come from by it as well. It tells a story.
Very true. Well, I think that's probably a reasonably good place, looking to the future, to sort of wind up. Carol's book is obviously there. It's on Amazon. Very much available, and it's a good read. I really enjoyed it. Shall we see if there's any questions?
Yes, if anybody
Why not?
had
Does anyone have any questions? I think we covered everything then. We're going to move some of the chairs out of the way, and then we're going to bring a couple of tables out so that people can stand around and have a drink and have a chat. Carol is here, I'm here, so if you have any questions or anything, we'd love to answer the questions. Carol, thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.